baby boomers.
I used to be with it.
Millennials.
Okay, boomer.
Generation X.
What's going on?
And Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacy and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program.
Thank you for not firing me yet.
Yeah, Norm and I typically need to suss each other out to see where we're going to land.
As somebody who gets everybody's press releases that are the most important thing in the world, I just try to be polite and remind everybody that none of their things matter.
I'm sorry. I feel like Ryan Walters just inhabited my body. And now, here are James and Emily. Good morning, Emily.
Hi, Velociraptor.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I am doing very well today.
Right.
Yesterday, not so well.
I know. I had to basically coerce you into being here today, and I told you.
I'm glad you did, though.
That our guest would make you feel better.
We have a wonderful guest today.
Friend of the pod?
Yes.
Friend of the pod, homie of, me from way back, and instigator of you.
Yes, right. So this is my favorite... Brace yourself for this introduction, all right?
I'm waiting.
My favorite member of the radical, left-wing, socialist-selling, pornography-promoting, America-hating media.
Hello.
I'm sorry. I feel like Ryan Walters just inhabited my body, and that all came spilling out.
Well, you should see somebody about that. My name's Trace Savage. I'm the editor-in-chief of Non-Doc Media, and I occasionally get called far left. I occasionally get called far right, and I'm thrilled to be here with two of my favorite professors in the state of Oklahoma, James Davenport and Emily Stacy.
We are all. Listen, for people who don't know. And I can't imagine if you pay attention to Oklahoma politics at all and you're not aware of Non-Doc.
Yeah. Shame on you.
Shame on you, because the work that they do is just outstanding. I'm just going to say
it's necessary.
And
thank you.
They are on top of things consistently and dig into places that other people don't seem to want to go. Right?
Yeah.
That's that you could also be describing a proctologist, but sometimes I do talk about journalism as like working like back to the turd mines, like gotta go dig out the turds and put them on the internet for everyone to see.
Particularly political media.
Certainly political media. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I just thought I would throw my name out there before.
Yes, we were going to get there. We
got to build you up.
And then we like to meander around.
That's totally fine. I think if there's no prescribed agenda for this podcast, then I think we need to. I need to say a big heartfelt thanks to one of the hosts of this podcast. James Davenport is a longtime commentary contributor on Non-Doc. You've probably written 10 things, something like that over the years. And then Dr. Emily Stacy is the newest board member of the Sustainable Journalism Foundation, which is that's our legal name with the government.
It's a pretty cool legal name, by the way.
Not bad, right?
Not bad.
I'll never forget when we went nonprofit and we the night before we were announcing that, I was sitting up and I was probably having a drink thinking, oh shoot, we should buy sustainablejournalismfoundation.com before some local yokel does to, redirect it to their website. So now we pay $17 a year for that. Too.
Wonderful.
But and I think we have .org also. But anyway, the cat's out of the bag. You're on the board.
I am. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very humbled.
Thank you for not firing me yet. And I think it is fascinating because I've worked in nonprofit world before. We're here at a nonprofit at New View, which is just this fabulous facility with this podcast studio. Having a board for a journalism organization is a bit of a different beast. And I remember when we went nonprofit, we started in 2015. We just celebrated our 9th birthday. We started in 2015 as a for-profit publication, and there was no profit to be had. But when we went nonprofit, we had to figure out who the board was going to be. And so we pulled, our people who'd contributed in a non, quote unquote, tax deductible way before, but just who'd been, giving to support our mission. And, we had to look and go, okay, who is, has enough independence in their life to not, we're not going to get them fired, hopefully. We talked about that, and then who appreciates journalism and isn't going to be viewing this as sort of like a political power opportunity to call up and say, hey, wait a minute, I heard you're doing this story. I don't know that you need to do this story about this person, right? And then, how do we get people with a variety of backgrounds to, be present and visible, in communities in a way that yet also values some like people we trust, but who we trust to be honest with us. Sure. Right. And if there's ever anything that you don't agree with, or you have a concern about, or you think, hey, wait a minute, we need to look at X in our organization, I know that you are independent and strong-willed enough to tell me to my face as quote unquote, executive director / editor-in-chief of the organization. So anyway, I know our history implies that you have no problem telling me exactly what you think.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is one of the great things about you and I is that we have had a wonderful storied history dating back to Norman Public Schools, right?
25 years, maybe?
It's been you went to Jackson too, didn't you?
No, I went to McKinley.
McKinley, that's right.
McKinley, we're the best around.
That's right.
Alcott Middle School.
That's right. That's where we met. That's right.
7th grade.
Yeah.
I think we had science class together.
And y'all were like best buds from the start.
We were oil and water.
We were oil. We did not. I think it must have been because Savage and Stacy, when they aligned people in the class based on last name, I think we always sat right next to each other or behind one another.
We had English together as well.
That might
York,
be it.
I think.
Oh, I do remember.
We were contentious mostly in English class, which makes sense, right? We're both political. We're both very opinionated.
I read good. Yeah.
Exactly, right? We were both we like to one up each other, I think. We were very nemesis.
Oh, right. And neither of us backed down.
Ever.
And so anyway, many years passed.
Indeed.
And we both graduated high school and college. And then one day, or I can't remember, you may have still been in college. But anyway,
I was.
One day I got a new job out of college. My first job out of college, I took a job out of the newspaper selling vacuum cleaners door to door. That lasted one day.
Yeah, I tried to do something similar to that. How funny.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then, it didn't go well?
Yeah.
I walked in and the older gentleman who I never saw, but he owned this company. It was Kirby Vacuum Cleaners. I mean, this is like a national brand. Right. And so I'm going through the training. I'm like learning how to suck dead skin cells out of a mattress with this vacuum cleaner. And they're telling me like, hey, you start with, the price point is $1,300 on this vacuum. And then, you just work your way down and the minimum you can sell it for is like $350. And so then whatever you end up selling the person at is you get a portion of that, profit and difference. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know, what am I doing here? And while I was there, I got a voicemail from Darwin Maxey at the time was being rebranded as eCapital. And I didn't go back. I called and left a message. It was like, I'm not coming back for day 2. But I walked into that vacuum cleaner salesman business up in Norman by the Brahms off of Robinson. And it reeked of cigarette smoke. You could tell the owner of the company was in the back somewhere just chain smoking. And there was an oxygen line like going all through and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, what am I going to die? Like, so I was very grateful. I'll forever be grateful to Darwin, rest in peace, that he called me. And so I got that job at the bill tracking service. And I walked in like my second day. One of us had been hired like the next day also.
You were hired first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was there for like a day or two.
Yeah. And he interviewed me.
And then one day I walked in And there you were. And I was just like, in my head, I was just like, we hate each other. but turns out as adults,
you're right,
we actually liked each other.
Yes, very much so. Yes,
but indeed. It did take like a couple months to be like,
we had Norm and I typically need to suss each other out, just suss people out generally, and to see where we're going to land.
Yeah.
I think we're just that breed of human beings.
Yeah. And so then another 15, what is math? I'm not good at math. What is math? If I were good at math, I wouldn't be doing journalism.
I started at eCapital in
2008.
Yeah, December of 2007. 2008 was my very first session. Yeah.
Same here.
So yeah, exactly. So it's been forever, dude.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and now you're on the board. Cheers.
Now we're ancient. Yay, Trace. I'm so glad we figured this out.
Right.
I'm just saying. Y'all are
Shut up, James.
Old people.
All right, Gen X. glad you could stick your foot in there.
Says the guy with all the gray in his beard, right?
So let me give a final plug and then turn it to wherever you want to go. So we did just turn 9 as non-doc. If you're not familiar with this, go to nondoc.com, nondoc.com. We are still having a little fundraising push in September. Unfortunately, the more you grow and hire people, it feels you're raising money all the time. Right. But I just want to say thank you to everybody who came out to our birthday parties in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City. We've got some new people joining the staff. We've got some exciting stories in the pipeline, and we've moved into a beautiful office in the Paseo, and just really, very humble in many ways to think of all the people who've supported our efforts, continue to support our efforts. Both of you, certainly as well. And just want to say thank you to everybody. If you're not signed up for our direct text service, I think that's the best way to avoid the algorithms of Google and Facebook and Twitter, and just get texts on topics you like. So that's my final plug, is that you can pick, if you like legislative stuff, you can sign up for our legislative articles. If you like education, you can sign up for that. You can do Edmond, right. OKC, you're in Norman, you're signed up for the Norman stuff. So that's my final plug. Now what terrible political nonsense do we want to talk about?
I haven't heard enough from
what
Dad
I was going to say is,
please.
With all the stuff going on nationally, it's been so nice that at the state it's been kind of calm and no big things going on, and just it's been.
Is that what's
maybe
happened?
That's not.
No, that's not what happened. We had
what's the big story in Oklahoma right now? Maybe potential impeachment, maybe not, of Ryan Walters. You tell me what's going on there. So there's almost 30 Republicans now, right?
Well, Jimsy McGirt got arrested again, but I can't seem to get the Seminole Nation to send me the documents. So we'll have a legal roundup maybe next week if we can get some information about that.
Very good.
That's a great question. I mean, I think from a political standpoint, the sort of schism in the legislative Republican caucuses is sort of continuing to schism. And, it coming out of the August 27th runoff, when the legislature comes back into session in 2025, you'll have the guy who was the floor leader in the Senate last year, Greg McCourtney, who was set up to be the pro tem of the Senate, the leader, probably. He lost in Ada. He literally attempted to defund the police, and that didn't go well. And I mean, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but also kind of literally did promote that. And so then the House Appropriations Chairman, who crapped all over his farmland, and I literally, and made his neighbors mad with the humanure whole thing.
That is such a strange.
It's a wild scenario. But Chairman Kevin Wallace, he lost in the runoff to a guy named Jim Shaw, who moved to Lincoln County from Arcadia in 2021, and it's just I think it highlighted both of those defeats. On the one hand, hyper-local issues in a lot of ways, right? But then also sort of that anti-incumbent sentiment from sort of a section, or arguably at least a half of the Republican electorate that just wanted change and maybe even more conservative, or more of a purely conservative direction versus going, oh, my legislator is going to be the number one person in charge in the Senate. I bet that's good for our district. Or the appropriations chairman is, going to be bringing in these projects and, I wonder if that's good for our district. A plurality, a majority of the voters in those seats in the Republican primary, to be clear, and runoff, chose to go a new direction. Right. And actually, I think across most of Oklahoma that had runoff elections on August 27th, there was higher voter turnout than there was back in June for the primary. And so that was a factor as well. The fact the legislature was in session until the very end of May. I was actually on Gina Timberman's podcast, Timber People, which records right here. Right. I was sitting in this very seat at the end of May, just like cynical and like pissed off, and I was like trying to be positive with Gina because she's just such a wonderful person. Right. But I'm just like, these legislators, why were we there till the end of May? And it's a really fascinating question. I kind of got into it in that discussion, but the budget was the same as if they had done it a month earlier. And all it did was shorten the time that incumbents had to run for reelection. For some reason in 2023, they passed a bill. Republicans unanimously voted for it. They bumped up the June primary date 1 week. Yeah. I literally cannot find anyone who knows why.
Why? Yeah. But the motivation there.
Right. And the Democrats don't know. They voted no. Right. And so the Republicans are just like, I can't remember. It was one of 1,000 bills we voted on, right? Sure. But it was someone's idea, and it blew up in faces, but it is interesting. So I think if you want to talk the big political story, Ryan Walters, if he, burps, it's a big scandal. But I think that is a bigger issue. I agree.
So do you think the legislature is going to lurch even further right as a result of some of these elections?
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know that. I don't think the leadership, I guess if the Senate somehow decided to go with Senator David Bullard from Durant as opposed to Senator Lonnie Paxton from Tuttle, I think that would be a sign of that. Speaker designee Hilbert from Bristow is seems to be locked in and had a wide margin, and the House didn't really lose a lot of, there weren't major ideological flips in seats in the House really. A couple, but not in a 80-person, caucus. And then, the Senate is a lot closer, and really that's where the split has been. Yeah. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch because Paxton's not going to lead exactly like Treat did. But at the same time, for a few years, the Senate really had sort of a, I don't want to say a talent dearth, but there was nobody really with much healthcare experience. There's probably going to be a couple healthcare people into the Senate now. Dr. Julie McIntosh beat Senator Stevens out in Senate District 3. Randy Grellner, who's a physician in Stillwater. So I think that the Senate has had a lot of internal struggles. I know that, and I'm trying to think of how I can kind of phrase this in a way that's accurate and not too obtuse. But there's been a lot of jostling for positions, and I don't know that if you tally up what happened in the last two elections, June and August, I don't think the makeup of the Senate has changed wildly. You had Cody Rogers lost in the Tulsa area. He was not he was not in the leadership circle. He was not a vote for Treat and McCourtney. Aaron Reinhart, who I also think has a medical background, he won that seat. And so, in theory, that's for the existing leadership team establishment, they picked up that seat. But then McCourtney lost, obviously. Really kind of unclear where that individual, Wingard, stands, which in some ways is probably a good idea, right? Like, if he is open-minded and not out there shooting his mouth off right now, it's probably a decent sign. That's fair. But if he were, already had his mind made up on everything, like we'd know about it, right? Like there'd be a Twitter account. So, right. And then Jessica Garvin lost to somebody, I think further conservative than her. And so that's, a big change there. But Shelley Gortney lost in Broken Arrow to Christy Gillespie, who's the vice mayor and sort of probably more of a Chamber of Commerce Republican, which replaces Nathan Dahm, who was certainly not supportive of the incumbent leadership team. So there's been a couple others. I'm sure I'm not thinking of. McIntosh. It's unclear where McIntosh is. And Stevens was not always, firmly one side of this schism or another. So this is a lot of inside baseball. But I guess my point is, I don't know that those flips in seats, it's not going to turn the tide to, oh my gosh, now, the Dusty Deevers wing of the Republican caucus is in power, and so, but it'll be interesting to see, right? I mean, I think people take notice, and if it seemed like the leadership was not in a position for the 2024 election to protect their incumbent leaders from more grassroots candidates, I think there's going to be some things that might be viewed as mistakes that might get changed. I think they might kick back the election another week as originally had been. I think they might try to get the heck out the door before the final Friday in May, like typically they try to do. And I don't know that having 8 publicly aired YouTube budget summits where it's, everybody's bickering is just captured in perpetuity.
It was pretty delicious for the spectator, however.
It was pretty obnoxious for the reporter.
I get it. I know.
Listen, we talked about this before. I had my complaints about that whole process.
As someone who live tweeted all eight or nine budget summits, and then the Senate subcommittee process, that was painful, I'm sure. It was just preposterous because the leadership would say, oh, this is how we're doing this. And the subcommittee chairmen are empowered. And then they'd have a subcommittee meeting and the committee chairman would be like, well, I don't have the authority to make this decision, and you're sitting there going like, but what are we here at 7:30 on a Thursday for? Like, why are we doing this? And so I thought the budget portal was great. Yeah, I think that shall continue, is my understanding from a conversation that I moderated in Tulsa the other day with Speaker Designee Hilbert and Pro Tem Designee Paxton. So anyway, there's always good, there's always positive, and there's always change. Sure. Right. And if you only look at the negative, then that's all you're ever going to look at.
That's fair.
I had the opportunity to visit with several senators over the last couple of months, and my impression was that Paxton is pretty well liked in that chamber by his colleagues, but it's easy to be liked when you're not the one making decisions that make people mad, right? When you've got to, as the pro tem, start making decisions that some of your colleagues are not going to be happy with, a lot of that goodwill can get eaten up if you're not careful.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for us and me to say because I don't get to be in the caucus meetings. Sometimes you hear some things. I do think that it's time for a fresh start in both chambers. I don't even think that, McCall or Treat would disagree with that, right? I mean, there is some benefit for having different voices and different approaches, over time. And I think that when, Paxton is well liked by some folks. I think actually one thing that's really interesting is I think Paxton and Governor Stitt get along pretty well. They agreed on some controversial pension legislation that I don't want to bore everybody with the details on. Stitt put out a statement that was much more congratulatory of Paxton being elected as the caucus's designee than he had with McCourtney. Now, some of that could be, McCourtney being from Ada, having close ties to the Chickasaw Nation, Stitt having feuded with the sovereign tribal nation for, a while now. Not all feud. I mean, they've signed some compacts actually recently that looks like, good relations between governments. But I say all that is that I think that maybe alleviates just a little pressure if you don't have the governor, kind of coming at you a little bit or trying to I don't know. On the other hand, the governor, kind of got into some runoff races and didn't. I think he batted like 1 for 3, right? I mean, he tried to help Wallace out, which I also think is fascinating, right? Like sitting governor, popular governor in the Republican Party, and people had already made up their mind. We're going for this guy Jim Shaw, and then he supported Gillespie in SD 33, and she won, but then he also supported Jenny Schmidt in SD 47's Republican runoff, and Kelly Hines won that. So, which probably down the road, if Hines does end up in the Senate, he probably remembers that, So it's kind of an odd deal. That's going to be interesting to see to watch in November with Aaron Brewer, the Democrat who's running in that sort of a purple metro seat. That's Treat's seat that he's vacating after 13 years in the legislature. So, if we could just hit pause on the world and maybe I could catch up on some stories that we've got, halfway done, that would be great. But obviously that's not how things work.
Do you think the governor's going to get his tax cuts that he's been now with? Is the Senate going to move on that?
I think what they would probably say and what I would get and what I think is probably true is that there's not going to be any decisions made on that until after the February Board of Equalization meeting. I mean, if they come in and again, there's still major increases in revenue and collections still continue to be, higher than anticipated, I think it really provides a big lane for that conversation. I don't think fundamentally the core of the Senate has changed so much that they're not still concerned about, avoiding a revenue failure in the future. But every passing year, the people who were there who remember, the cigarette fee getting, axed by the Supreme Court and having a $2 in the rainy day fund or whatever it was, those people are gone. And so I don't know. I mean, I think ideally, right, like if you're Hilbert and Paxton, you're coming into 25, 26 in the 60th Oklahoma legislature. It's a 2-year legislature. So before the next election, I think ideally you might want, and again, they might laugh at me because they know more about, political stuff than I do. But ideally, you might want to have that decision be made in 26 ahead of when people are filing for office, ahead of, an actual election versus if you do that right out the bat in 25, well, by the time 26 rolls around, well, what have you done for me lately? Exactly. And so I think that same thing possibly with the cost of living adjustment for pension systems. Why give people the, bump in their retirement benefits in March 25 when you can give it to them in March 26, I guess. And I mean, that's very cynical, right? But that's also politics.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. I'm curious what your take is on the establishment of a Freedom Caucus and why they didn't name all of the members, just out of curiosity.
I didn't go to that press conference. What the question I cannot figure out is why Congressman Josh Burkeen was wearing Representative Bob Ed Culver's jeans. But beyond that,
touche.
I
love you, kid.
I think that alignment has existed.
Nobody remembers Reynoldsing, right? We made this a verb, dude. In the
actually,
press room.
Well, it's funny you say that because there was a press release yesterday from two members of, I don't think they were at the press conference, but they're almost assuredly in this new caucus. Sure. Representative Tom Gann from Inola and Representative Kevin West from Moore put out a press release calling for questioning Corporation Commissioner Todd Hyatt's impartiality on the ONG rate case because he's obviously been accused of groping a man who, represents energy companies that may be involved in that whole deal. And but they put that out, and they talked in the press release. It was like, we're considering filing a writ with the Supreme Court asking for this, that, or the other. And I read that and I thought, Mike Reynolds, like because Reynolds has sort of like aligned with Bob Anthony, which is just a wild scenario. Right, and because they tried to stop the securitization of the Winter Storm Uri debt. And so they put out that press release, and I was just like, this has Mike Reynolds all over it, And so to your point, for people who don't know, Reynolds was back then a sort of obstructionist House member from South Oklahoma City who, objected and debated every bill and voted against, nearly everything, and was very frustrated, and had some points at times.
For sure.
But then also would drive you nuts when it's like, okay, it's 11:15 at night. Like, we got to get out of here. Like,
Put up Robert's rules, sir. Put him back in your pocket. Right.
Yeah. Just reauthorize the sunset on the cosmetology board and move down the road, So I think that we're joking here, but the new Freedom Caucus, I think it's literally called the New Freedom Caucus, is sort of maybe a more formalization of the more ideologically pure conservative Republican group of the in the legislature. That's my attempt to not use terms like far right, far left. Right.
There used to be something called the Platform Caucus.
Right. Similar. And they were and their whole thing was like, we got to support the Republican platform. I think, frankly, that they probably, if they didn't already want to rebrand after the National Republican Party platform
disappeared,
right. I think maybe they had to have a new, get out hire a graphic designer, get a new logo. But, we'll see. I mean, somebody texted me and we're like, are you covering that? And it was like Tuesday morning or something. And I was like, I don't cover caucus announcements. I mean, I didn't cover the creation of the diabetes caucus. I didn't cover, so, I've been invited to come speak to a caucus, or something. I don't actually know that I ever took anybody up on that, but I mean, okay, great. These guys are going to have lunch together in a private room. Cool. Big news. So
I'm just going to throw this out there. You tell me what you think. I think the reason they didn't announce the other members is there aren't any other members. That's it. That's those 7.
I said, Gann and West.
We don't want to tell you who all the rest of the members are. They didn't want. It's because they don't have them. They're just
bones of you, James.
I'm just saying.
I think that I think you got at least 2 Wests in that caucus. I think you've got a Tom Gann. I think you've probably got maybe another senator or 2 who may, who knows, but it is sort of silly. Like, well, we there's a bunch of us here, but we're not all here. And you're not allowed to,
you can take that in a couple of ways, by the way.
You're not allowed to come to our lunches. We're going to be meeting in a closed room and we're going to have some chicken sandwiches, every week. Any questions? I mean, that's what that press conference, essentially is. And great, so, but I mean, heck, everybody at the Capitol thinks their kind of thing that they're doing is the most important thing in the world. I mean, and I don't mean to, as somebody who gets everybody's press releases that are the most important thing in the world, I just try to be polite and remind everybody that none of their things matter. No, it's okay. That's it. Where's the rim shot? Where's the producer on the? Yes, it was a joke. That was
we'll add some sound effects.
That was the long con of that dry humor.
I love it.
What do you think are going to be? And I know again we're still sitting in September, not even hit really mid-September yet. But what do you think are just going to shape up to be?
It's the kind of
the battles that are going to, the major policy battles that are going to happen next year?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of funding questions that were punted to next year. And I think the House thought that obviously Kevin Wallace was going to be still involved, leading their appropriations team. The Senate obviously thought McCourtney was going to be, leading their caucus. And so, potentially boring but really important things like the Legacy Capital Finance Fund, which was sort of Wallace's, a project that he supported and a concept that he supported. And it was actually developed by John McFetridge, Midtown Johnny, who is the budget leader for the staff side of the House. And that was his idea, and it's sort of a self-financing 0%. If you're James, let's say you are the Department of Environmental Quality, and you need a new parking garage because your other one is like literally a threat to health and welfare of the public, and it's been 9 years and nobody can figure out what to do with it, and suddenly the legislature is like, okay, we're going to finance blowing this old parking garage up and building a new one. And it's going to be $20 million. And we're going to finance it to, we're going to give you the $20 million now. And, but over the next 30 years, you're going to pay that back into the Legacy Capital Financing Fund. Okay. The idea being, if you just went out and you said, we need to authorize $20 million in state revenue bonds, you're going to, I'm not up to speed on what the interest rates are, but it's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8% somewhere in there. And maybe a little less depending on, call Mike Davis with the Development Finance Authority, but, who does a great job, if he's listening and is a genius. And, but so that, okay, we can either go take that loan out, right, and pay, MetLife, this amount over a period of time, or we can take this sort of large amount of cash that we have in the state coming out of COVID, coming out of some changes, some prudent fiscal decisions in the past. We've got all this cash. We've got $700 million. We're going to give the $20 million to this state agency with the agreement that the state agency is going to pay it back over 30 years. Now we've got to give them some money to make those debt payments every year, right? But we're saving that interest rate. And the other thing we're doing, if we do that with, I'm not saying we, but that's the idea behind it, is the state, if they are, okay, we instead of doing all those bond payments, we do the legacy capital financing. We've got $500 million out that way. And we've got in any given year, $80 million of these payments we got to make. I'm just pulling out numbers. We have a bad financial year. In statute, we can change it so that you don't have to pay it back in FY27. Okay. So you keep your $955,000 that you would otherwise have paid back, right? And if 20 agencies do that, that's $19 million, right? You can't go tell MetLife, hey, we're having a rough time. Like, can we just not pay you this year? So like there's a built-in conservative concept into that of like, well, we're going to self-finance this in a way that gives us flexibility as opposed to go out and tote a note from, these firms in New York who couldn't find Oklahoma on a map, right? And so that's that concept. For whatever reason, the Republican-dominated state Senate a lot of them hate that idea. They hate that concept. They want to go take the loans out. They think it's better for the state bond rating. It was literally called a scheme, like some sort of it was disparaged by Treat, by McCourtney, by other Senate leaders last year. It was created 2 years ago. And I always thought that was weird, right? Like this, I feel like objectively is one of the more conservative models you could make, which is like, don't spend what you don't have, right? And don't be a 19-year-old kid and go take out a loan and get a Mustang. I'm thinking of our good friend Brian. Shout out to Brian Smith in Tulsa, not the OSBI commissioner, our other friend. And he's cool too, but
are you or your organization looking for unvarnished, unbiased scholarly political analysis for your op-eds, candidates debates, or interviews regarding all things political?
Well, look no further. We are the Democracy Slingers. We're here to host, comment, educate, or just preach the good word of American politics to your school, club, company, or organization. Get in touch with us at democracyslingers@gmail.com.
Anyway, so for some reason, so you asked me, this is a long way back of the breadcrumbs, what are the fights going to be? And I think that they kicked a lot of that conversation to next year. Mm-hmm. Now, Wallace is gone.
Right.
I don't know to what extent Trey Caldwell is like, yeah, this is my hill to die on. Yeah. I don't know to what extent Paxton hates the legacy. I don't know. So that'll be interesting to see. Do they continue to use that? Do they pull some of that back? What I also don't know is like, is it such a threat to, commerce, and I like little c commerce, that are there lobbyists for big bond issuing entities that are going, well, hey, we need to not do this anymore because that's no interest for us. We want to sell bonds. We want to, write bonds. Mm-hmm. So I think that that is, that'll be something that I probably need to spend some time trying to get behind the scenes and understand, like, what are the motivations here? And maybe there's arguments and concerns about the LCF that I don't fully grasp, but it certainly seems to me that if I was running our organization, non-doc, and it was like, well, we could either go out and get, 7% interest rates and pay this off, over time, or we could use our massive cash over, and be responsible with this and avoid those interest rates and give ourselves flexibility. Seems to me that would be the way to go. But but on the other hand, maybe that's not the way you run a banana stand. I don't know. So I think that's one. I think there's some other, other big questions with you mentioned the tax cut and I mentioned pension systems earlier. The child care tax credit is a big question that was proposed last year. It nearly got to the finish line. Wallace was also the person pushing the judicial evaluation program. Yeah. I don't know if that gets picked back up. I'm guessing, not as heavily. Right. So somebody said to me that the other day that Wallace losing for the House is like Sam Bradford getting injured at the BYU game, right? Like returning Heisman winner, I think, like returning, guy for his senior season, and oh my gosh, right off the bat, we've lost our quarterback, and I think that that was going to be his final 2 years, and so the silver lining is, and we cover these elections, and you write things and try to do debates and different things, and the thing I think is interesting is that I tried to get a debate between Wallace and Jim Shaw. I just thought it was really important for, Lincoln County and for people to talk through these issues, right? And see where the challenger stands and, see what the incumbents answer to, the concerns about wind farms and humanure and whatnot. And Wallace did it and Shaw didn't. And so I can't say that I have a great relationship with Jim Shaw. I've talked to him on the phone 2 or 3 times. On the other hand, it dawned on me the other day that he might be, I might be his closest friend in the building. We'll see. So, Representative-elect Shaw, look forward to meeting you in person. And it's always fascinating because you get all these new people in. Yeah.
Right.
And I hear a lot of good things about a lot of people. But you always kind of hear that. And, who's no leader of the either caucus is going to go, well, we got a bunch of idiots coming into the caucus next year, but we'll get them whipped up into shape. No, I mean, people are excited about, new blood generally, and people didn't run and, so there were open seats. Yeah. But my advice to new members, if anybody ever asked it, would be to the same advice that Darwin Maxey gave me when I started at eCapital, which was he grabbed me and he was always paranoid about, he didn't want anybody to overhear our conversations.
No, very in your face. Yes.
So he's like, follow me, son, and so he gets me and we're in an elevator and I'm like, why are we going down? And he's like, I just want to make sure we can talk privately. And I'm like, okay, thinking like, well, somebody could bug the elevator. But anyway, and he goes, he points at his ears. He goes, God gave you 2 of these. And then he pointed at his mouth and 1 of these. And you need to use them in proportion. And I was like, I'll never forget that. And I think that's good advice for anybody who's new at the Capitol, whatever, if you're a journalist or whether you're an elected official. But I guarantee you that come like mid-March, some new lawmaker who's been there for 6 weeks will, really try to assert themselves in a way. And I like to say there'd be a bunch of people walking around thinking they own the place because everybody's calling them senator or representative and buying them steak dinners. Right. And it's like, So I just have to, I remind myself sometimes of people like, there is no provision in Oklahoma law that I'm not allowed to be here in 12 years. So I'll just, maybe I'll wait you out. So exactly. I got to do better at my health though, to do that.
Yes, I need you around, sir.
Thank you.
We love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu.
What's the challenge in covering state politics right now and the environment? What obstacles do you run into in trying to do the best that you can to give an accurate picture of what's going on in any given, situation or context?
I think for just specifically thinking about journalism, I think a lot of ways our challenge, and maybe I'm short-sighted here, is content distribution. We have this information. How do we get people to listen to all 50 minutes of this podcast? Right. You throw in enough fart jokes, maybe they'll stay with you for a little bit.
I lock them in the car and make them listen to it with me on the way.
That only works for 6 Davenports, sir.
Right. And if those 6 Davenports would vote, we'd have a different senator in Southwest Oklahoma City.
He just had to go there. Dead. Just had to go there.
They weren't of age.
Well, that doesn't always stop them. So
I walked right into that.
We're talking about voting restrictions.
Yes, we are.
Anyway, I think that's. People had that question about the primary elections in June. Mm-hmm. It's summer. Your kids are out of school. They're driving you nuts. You're trying to take a vacation. You got to go see your mom. You've got a deadline at the end of the fiscal year in, late June. You're trying to meet, you're staying late at work. You're doing all this. Are you really making a voting plan on the 3rd Tuesday of June? Are you getting your absentee ballot? Are you sending it in? Are you going out and actively scrolling non-doc or going to the state voter portal page to figure out what am I voting on? Mm-hmm. We've already voted in January, in February, in March, twice, in April. There's a lot going on, and I think that if that's just elections, we can't get people to pay attention deeply to elections. It's really hard to get them focused too deeply on policy and governance questions. So I think that's it. The other thing is there's just a lot of government. I think I've talked about this before in this room, maybe on your podcast, but I think Oklahoma has more government per capita than anywhere else in the country. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some state where I don't know that they have. We have 77 counties. Maybe someone somewhere has 88 counties. Maybe someone else has more than 520 school districts. I don't think so. We've got circuit engineering districts. Mm-hmm. We've got, innumerable state agencies and boards and commissions. We've got, 600 and some municipalities. And then you have 38 federally recognized tribal nations, sovereign tribal nations with their own governments, with their own court systems, with their own legislative branches, with their own executive branches, with their own elections that, few people monitor, and so I think that's part of it. It's just like Bennett Brinkman on our team told me that he got a little triggered when he saw in our system that there was already a tag for election 2025, because Blake Douglas, who's our new Edmond Civic Reporting Project leader, he did a story about the mayor of Edmond not seeking reelection and an early look at who's considering running. And so we had to create a tag that says election 2025. And Bennett saw that and was just like, oh my God, and so it does seem like it never stops, So I just and like you guys work at a university, right? Whose Board of Regents I cannot even begin to cover, right? Because we got to we're trying to, hopefully start covering OSU's board a little bit more and then you got the Russo board and then you've got, all these other boards. So it's an exhausting amount of government. And then you've got a guy like Ryan Walters, who we've mentioned on here a couple times, whose sort of strategy is often like, yes, but how can I get the attention on me, and sometimes that backfires a little bit, but other times it's a lot of earned media and love him or hate him. He's probably got 20% of the Republican electorate. Yeah. So if he's running for governor, that's probably a good...
The Bondar vote.
Start
the Bondar vote.
Sorry, I needed to throw it out there.
That is a good. It looks like we need to wrap up, but I'd like to shout out Matt Patterson on our team for the best headline of the election season, which was Paul Gondar when he lost.
Yes, that's
Tom
fabulous.
Cole. So. I guess if I could shout other people out, yes. We've, Tara McMillan Hall is our new development director.
We love Tara.
And I've got to go have a meeting with her shortly and would love you to reach out and meet her if you're listening. If you've made it this far in the podcast, it means you probably need to get a little more familiar with what we're doing to meet our team. Megan Prather is our distribution and development specialist. She helps get that content out to local papers that they can republish it in. And our news ambassadors program, which is cool if people want to volunteer an hour a week to just help share some content with people in their community, urban or rural. That's great. I feel like I'm missing some other people. Michael McNutt, the incomparable.
Oh my God, yes.
You have any favorite Michael McNutt stories, Emily?
You got 2 minutes.
I've got too many Michael McNutt stories. No, this dude is just...
He's the nicest guy in the world.
He really is.
Sometimes I feel bad that I'm not nearly as nice as him. And
he is, and he doesn't understand what an institution he is unto himself, right? He's just an incredible
wealth of knowledge. Great person to work with our young journalists. I think I talked with other people as well. Joe Tomlinson was our longtime Edmond reporter, is embarking on new opportunities in Ohio, where we assume he's registered to vote for the presidential election.
Yes, we do.
But yeah, I'm sure there's a million other people. We've had some great interns this summer, Faith Anna Olson from Oklahoma Christian, and then Langston University graduate Sasha Disaby. And I think I got her name right. Nice. They did great work for us covering elections this year. Tristan Lovelace in Tulsa is our awesome courts reporter. He's an attorney turned journalist. And so he just brings a lot of great perspective and ability to wade through complicated court matters.
Sure.
Another person we might want to reach out to when we do another court show.
Hey, right? We would love to have him join you. So.
Absolutely. No. I need to interrupt really very quickly because Trace doesn't get enough credit for bringing this into not birthing it, but definitely nurturing it into the institution that it is today. And he is not somebody who likes to be shouted out or, the center of attention, but he has made non-doc what it is today. And you deserve quite a bit of credit for that. So
thank you.
I'm incredibly proud of you. I think we are the same age, I hope, and we're just going to keep it at that. But I am incredibly proud to know you and to be part of the board and just, part of your existence.
Well, thank you so much. Don't fire me yet. And we spurred Michael McNutt and Tara Hall both into texting me as we talk about them right now.
Love it. All right. Yeah. Yes. Wrap up, James.
Our guest today has been Trace Savage with Non-Doc. Fantastic.
We love it.
Fantastic journalist. Fantastic citizen.
Human being.
And we're always delighted when we can have you come and visit with us. You do great work. Your whole team does great work. And we're happy to share that with others as best we can.
Indeed.
And we want to remind everyone that
democracy is not a spectator sport.
We'll see you next time.
This is Deborah, the resident Gen Z member of the Not My Generation podcast family. Not My Generation is produced in the Possibilities Inc. studio. This episode was produced by Lauren Peaches Keller. It was edited by Santiago Ramones. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Send a voice memo to notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu and you could hear your voice on an upcoming episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the podcast with others. You can check out previous episodes on any podcast app and on our podcast website at notmygeneration.captivate.fm, where we also provide our show notes. And remember, you can follow Not My Generation on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NMG Podcast, and on Facebook at Not My Generation Podcast. We look forward to interacting with you soon.